Good afternoon, Mr. Young.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you? Just doing a sound check. How are you?
I'm good. Sound good.
All right. Thank you. We'll be starting momentarily. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it's 4 p.m. Let's see if we can get everybody in. Good afternoon to everyone. Michelle, are you available? Okay, good. I'm going to go ahead and read the opening statement. I'm sure Commissioner May will join us shortly. Mr. Young, could you start the recording, please? Good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today's date is November 17th, 2022. We are convening broadcasting this public hearing by video conferencing. My name is Anthony Hood, and I am joined by Vice Chair Miller, Commissioner May, and Commissioner Imamura. Also joined by the Office of Zoning staff, Ms. Sharon Shellen and Mr. Paul Young, who will be handling all of our virtual operations, and also from the Office of Zoning Legal Division, Mr. Dennis Liu. I will ask others to introduce themselves at the appropriate time. The virtual public hearing notice is available on Office of Zoning's website. This proceeding is being recorded by a court reporter, and the platforms used are Webcast Live, WebEx, and YouTube Live. The video will be available on Office of Zoning's website after the hearing. All persons planning to testify should have signed up in advance and will be called by name at the appropriate time. At the time of sign up, all participants will complete the oath or affirmation required by subtitle Z48.7. Accordingly, all those listening on WebEx or by phone will be muted during the hearing, and only those who have signed up to participate or testify will be unmuted at the appropriate time. When called, please state your name and home address before providing your testimony. When you are finished speaking, please mute your audio. If you experience difficulty accessing WebEx or with your telephone call-in or have not signed up, then please call our OZ hotline number at 202-727-0789. If you wish to file written testimony or additional supporting documents during the hearing, then please be prepared to describe and discuss it at the time of your testimony. The subject of this evening's hearing is zoning commission case number 22-28, 1100 South Capitol LLC. This is a design review on M and South Capitol Streets sub area and square 698 lots 814 and 817. And again, the address is 1100 South Capitol Street, Southeast. And today's date is November the 17th, 2022. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with provisions of 11Z DCMR Chapter 4 as follows. Preliminary matters, applicant's case. The applicant has up to 60 minutes. Not sure if we need all 60 minutes. Report of the Office of Planning and District Department of Transportation. Report of other government agencies. Report of the ANC. In this case, is ANC 6D. Testimony of organizations and individuals. Organizations 5 minutes, individuals 3 minutes. And we will hear in the following order from those who are in support, opposition, and undeclared. Then we'll have rebuttal and closing by the applicant. Again, the OZ hotline number is 202-727-0789 for any concerns during these proceedings. At this time, the commission will consider any preliminary matters. Does the staff have any preliminary matters?
Yes, sir, just very quickly. Proffered expert witnesses, Dan Lobitz in architecture. His resume is at Exhibit 4F, page 1. It's with Stern Architects.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shellen. 1 second. So we have Mr. Lobitz. Again, his resume and exhibit is Exhibit 4F from Stern Architects. Any objections? Okay, I see no objections, so we will give him expert status on the zoning commission in this case.
Okay, the next two have previously been accepted as experts. Rick Parisi in, I'm not sure what he's being proffered in. But
Architect,
his architecture also,
landscape.
and William Zed in transportation from Grove Slade. Just want to accept them as experts in this case also.
Okay, we have previously approved, I believe Mr. Parisi and previously, I believe. So we will continue that status, and he's somebody saying something. I'm getting feedback from somewhere. Let me see who it is. Michelle, mute for a second. Let me see something. Okay, am I getting feedback? Okay, I'm not getting feedback now, so that's what it was. Okay, so any objections? All right, Michelle.
Okay, they are the experts that will be testifying. They do have some other experts that may have to answer questions. So I'm going to go ahead and read them off, even though they're not part of the direct testimony, just in case they do end up answering questions. There are two that were previously accepted, Marcelo Lopez, and his resume is at 4F, page 10. Brandis Elliott in land use and planning, previously accepted. Her resume is at 13B. So those two have previously been accepted if the commission would accept those. And the third one that has not been accepted is Keith Amon. He's a lead fellow and his resume is at 4F, page 9. So the two were previous, and then Mr. Amon is the only one the commission needs to accept as new.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Unless I hear otherwise, we will continue that status. Let me turn my eyes down because I hear myself. So I know if I don't like to hear myself, I know others don't like to hear me either. So let me see here. All right, let's continue. Unless I hear otherwise, we will continue the status. The only person that we seem to have not is Mr. Keith Amon, lead fellow. His resume also is Exhibit 4F, page 9. Any questions on Mr. Fellow? I'm sorry, Mr. Amon, who's a lead fellow. Any objections? Not
No.
seeing any. Okay, no objections. We will give him expert status as well. Anything else, Michelle?
Just briefly, DDOT's being represented by Aaron Zimmerman. OP is being represented by Steve Cochran. The applicant is being represented by Christy Scheiker and Ms. Bloomfield. And they could do a short presentation of 20 minutes if the commission would like the 20-minute presentation, or they could do a longer presentation of 35, 40 minutes. So that's it.
Thank you, Michelle, and I appreciate that. I did not see the time, so let's do 20 minutes and let's let them hit the highlights. I know they can hear me. I do have one preliminary matter. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Miller. I'm expecting a very important phone call. So once I get off, once it happens, I may be in the middle of a conversation. I'm going to drop for about 5 minutes. Okay. So when that happens, I don't know where I'll be or what's going on, but when it happens, I'm going to just excuse myself. But y'all keep going so we can finish.
Okay, thank you for the warning.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, Michelle and Mr. Young and everybody, we can bring everybody up and we can get started. Once Ms. Scheiker's team gets going, I will be quiet. And Ms. Scheiker, once your team is set up, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Hood, members of the commission. I'm looking to see if the rest of my team has come in before we start. I see Mr. Parisi, Mr. Zaid is there. We're waiting for Mr. Lobitz, our architect.
Mr. Lobitz, I could only unmute. It won't let me bring him on as a panelist, but he is unmuted now.
Let's see what's going on with that. He was just on a moment ago. And Mr. Young, while we see what we can do about Mr. Lobitz, if you would please bring up the PowerPoint presentation. Chairman Hood, they started our clock, maybe a couple minutes over. All right.
We'll deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. No, I think our long presentation is only 30 minutes, so it's not going to be. We'll try to shorten it up. I just want to make sure my architect is on. Dan, are you on? Can you?
I'm here. I'm
All
here. I don't know why my camera. I don't know why I'm not on camera. I don't.
Okay, so as long as you're here and you're going to be able to speak, I think that we'll go ahead and move on in the interest of time. So again, good evening and thank you for having us. We are here today to present an application for design review under Subtitle I, Chapter 7 for the property located at 1100 South Capitol Street. The property abuts, next slide, please. The property abuts L Street on the north and South Capitol Street on the west. The St. Vincent de Paul Church is located in the southern portion of the square on the south side of our property. And on the east, the property abuts a 15-foot public alley. This alley is effectively 20 feet in width due to a 5-foot dedicated alley easement that exists on the east side of the property. As you'll hear tonight, we're going to extend that 5-foot setback for the full length of our property to provide basically a 20-foot alley adjacent to our property. This north-south alley connects to a 30-foot east-west public alley, which extends to Half Street. The site is zoned D5 and is subject to design review based on its South Capitol Street frontage. The application proposes the construction of a residential building with approximately 263 units. It's fully compliant with the zoning regulations as well as with the M and South Capitol Streets sub-area. Next slide, please. We have worked closely with the district agencies. We're pleased to have support from the Office of Planning. The report from the Office of Planning did include one condition regarding signage and ornamentation on the upper levels of the building, and we have agreed to that. There were 3 comments within the Office of Planning report, which we will talk more about throughout our presentation, the pickup and drop-off zone and loading zone and the balconies on the East Court. As to the 5-foot setback along the alley, as I just mentioned, we would agree to a condition, and I believe the Office of Planning, as part of its testimony, is going to present the agreed upon condition that we've discussed. Next slide, please. We have also worked closely with DDOT. We have agreed to DDOT's 2 requested conditions and have submitted an updated TDM plan in the record. And we'll talk more about that in Mr. Zeid's testimony. Finally, while DOEE did not
Could you
submit
come
any
by? I'm
comments.
trying to get on camera and I can't. and I have to
Mr.
use the
Lobitz, can you go
presentation.
ahead and mute? Mr. Lobitz, if you can mute, thanks. While DOE did not submit comments, we did meet with them to review the project. We've provided an update of those discussions in our pre-hearing submission, and happy to answer any questions that might come out of that. Next slide, please. We've also had extensive engagement with the ANC and the immediate community, including the most impacted neighbors, as you can see by this summary. We always know that engagement is an important part of any project that comes before the commission. Next slide, please. Over the course of our 5 formal presentations to the ANC and to the ANC Executive Committee, we were asked to respond to a variety of questions and feel that we've had a collaborative working relationship with them. We've provided a detailed summary of those issues and our responses in the pre-hearing submission. I note here 3 commitments that we made in response to specific questions, and they're with respect to lighting, pet relief bags, and a disposal system, and information regarding the amenity fee. We've also worked very closely with the church, which is our immediate neighbor to the south. As part of our project, Mr. Lobitz, I think you need to mute. I think you need to mute. As part of our project, we are proposing exterior upgrades to the church property, which we're going to talk about during our presentation. These improvements will serve to significantly enhance the public realm and further the beautification of South Capitol Street at this prominent location. The church has submitted a letter in support, which is in the record at Exhibit 9. Finally, we have worked with the condo board at the recently constructed residential building known as the Kennedy on L Street. They are immediately on the other side of the public alley to the east of the site. They have expressed concerns about traffic conflicts within the alley, and we've been working with them to address those concerns. We're going to walk through the operation of our loading facilities tonight. And we also note that the condo board's president has submitted a copy of the proposed alley management and loading operations plan that we provided to them. We continue to commit to that operation plan and believe that those procedures, combined with the design of the loading facilities that we've worked very closely with DDOT on, result in a safe condition for the shared use of the public alley. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lobitz to walk through the design of the project. Mr. Parisi will then discuss the landscape, as well as the improvements to the church property. Mr. Zeid will go through transportation considerations, and then I'll wrap up our presentation with a summary of how the project satisfies the legal standard. Mr. Lobitz?
Good afternoon, Chairman Hood and members of the Commission. My name is Daniel Lobitz, and I'm a partner at Robert A.M. Stern Architects. Apologies, somehow I have not been admitted as a panelist, so I can't turn my camera on, but I can still explain to you our design. When we were engaged by the developers—
If you could go to the next slide, please, so that we can start with his thank you.
Oh, thank you. When we were engaged by the developers 1100 South Capitol Street to design a building at this location, we immediately appreciated the challenges and the opportunities. This is a very important and significant site, so we take the responsibility to do something beautiful here very seriously. First, the site is just north of M and South Capitol Streets, the most prominent intersection in a neighborhood that is meant to be a gateway into our nation's capital. In addition to its prominence, it is also the last remaining vacant site to be developed on the east side of South Capitol Street. Second, we had to design to the goals of the sub-area, specifically the creation of a monumental boulevard to the Capitol building and a development consistent with a high-density, vibrant, mixed-use corridor. Third, we had the challenge of fitting the development within the context of the iconic St. Vincent de Paul Church directly to the south and the historical importance of the location as a transition between the industrial heritage to the south and the political center to the north. I'm pleased to appear before this commission so that you may review our design. Next, please. Our initial inspiration is derived from the gracious classical apartment houses that dominate sections of New York and Washington. In order not to overwhelm the church, we have designed a fairly deconstructed western-facing facade that satisfies the South Capitol street wall requirements, but also maintains the rhythm of positive and negative space from the church parking lot, our southern bar, a courtyard on the second floor, and our northern bar. Our I-shaped building has a western-facing courtyard, which is paired with an eastern-facing courtyard on the third floor that provides for greater separation in places 50 feet from the residential building across the 15-foot alley. On the south side, the building is approximately 42 feet from the church, and there's a light and air easement such that none of the windows on this facade are at risk. In accordance with the design requirements, the building along South Capitol Street is set back 15 feet from our property line and an additional 1-to-1 setback above 110 feet until it tops out at the customary 130 feet for wide streets. We're committed to sustainability, and we're designing to achieve LEED Gold certification. Next, please. The ground floor has active amenity space fronting on South Capitol Street, which has been designed to be converted to retail in the future should demand increase in this location. The active interior amenity spaces create vitality and visual interest, as well as a strong street wall along South Capitol Street. You can also see the required 15-foot setback, which extends for the full length of the building all along South Capitol Street. As shown here, a pickup and drop-off zone in front of the main entry, which faces north along L Street, and also includes a curbside loading zone further east near the alley. Access to both the below-grade parking garage and the loading dock is from the existing public alley. The project will expand the effective width of the public alley to 20 feet by virtues of the existing 5-foot wide easement along the majority of the property's east frontage. This 5-foot setback will be voluntarily extended for the remainder of the property's frontage. The project is proposed to have 263 units, 162 below-grade parking spaces, zoning-compliant loading facilities within the building, and bike storage at ground level. Next, please. Here on the left is a second floor plan with its west-facing landscaped courtyard garden. On the right is the third floor plan with its east-facing courtyard garden, which provides improved light and air for our residents and for our neighbors across the alley as well. Next. Next, please. Here on the left is a typical floor plan. The units in this building are generally large, having an average size of 900 square feet. We currently anticipate that only 8% will be studios, 60% will be 1-bedroom units, and 32% will be 2- and 3-bedroom units. On the right, you can see the 10th floor plan with balconies on top of the north-facing bay. Next, please. Required setbacks are provided along South Capitol Street above 110 feet. These setbacks, in conjunction with an additional cantilevered balcony at the 12th floor, create roof terraces for the upper-level west-facing units. Next, please. An additional setback at the 13th floor, seen on the left, provides roof terraces for additional units. The penthouse, seen on the right, is fully set back and compliant with the zoning regulations. The penthouse includes 2 residential units for which the owner will make a contribution to the Housing Production Trust Fund. The penthouse also includes shared amenity spaces for the entire building. This floor also includes significant shared outdoor space for all residents, including a pool, gathering spaces, and a pet relief area. The balance of this level will be a green roof. Overall, the building proposes approximately 37 units with private outdoor terraces or Juliet balconies. The Office of Planning has asked us to consider adding balconies within the east courtyard. Our design intent was to provide separation from the abutting residential building and to provide privacy to residents within the courtyard. We believe that projecting balconies would significantly compromise that privacy. Adding inset balconies would solve the privacy issues, but would conflict with the design intent and with the goal of creating larger units overall. Therefore, we've maintained the strategy consistent with earlier dignified and monumental Washington, D.C. residential buildings with masonry detailing and punched windows and outdoor spaces for the most part on roofs and setbacks, and then also as accents in some other special places on the building. Next, please. Looking north, you can see how the building frames the view toward the Capitol and enhances the dignity of South Capitol Street. It also ties into the scale and character of the beautiful existing church. The massing is broken down into two symmetrical volumes to create a smaller scale that relates more effectively to the church, but that also creates a clear street wall in accordance with the zoning requirements. We envision a facade of warm, medium-toned brick with complementing limestone and masonry trim and punched windows and additional detailing in warm gray metal. The scale and proportions of our vertical wings and the coloration of the masonry harmonize with the existing church, and our mid-scale facade elements create a strong relationship to the church's spire. Next, please. Looking from the other direction, you can see how our building fills out the street wall and frames views when traveling south from the Capitol. You can also see our relationship to our neighbor on the north. Next, please. This is a more complete view of our building in its setting. We propose a beautiful symmetrical frontage facing South Capitol Street that frames a raised garden courtyard, and I'll show you a closer view of that in a later slide. The building has a clearly defined base, accented by fluted brick detailing, which gathers the third floor windows into a horizontal band. Vertically grouped windows at the top, combined with French balconies and our required setbacks, create the implied reading of a crown as the building meets the sky. The entrance faces north on L Street, just off the corner of the site, and is celebrated by a projecting bay window above that creates a sculptural element near the corner. The warm brick harmonizes with the church and is complemented with a warm gray metal detailing on the mid-scale elements of the facade. Next, please. Here, looking closer, the double height lobby and the main entrance with the canopy and flanking lanterns is the focal point on L Street's frontage, with the projected bay window marking its location. Here you can see a closer view of the base with its divided light windows, special brick and metal detailing, and fluted band at the third floor. Proposed signage for the building will be very discreet, although not represented in this rendering. We propose simple, softly lit signage identifying the building at the top edge of the entrance canopy and also flanking the front door. Next, please. Our goal along South Capitol Street is to create a pedestrian streetscape with lush landscaping and a strong street wall that is a significant improvement over what exists today. Our two-story base has beautiful metalwork and masonry detailing to enhance the pedestrian experience with soldier course piers, masonry corner details, and, as mentioned before, fluted brick panels gathering the third floor windows into a continuous band. Symmetrical groupings of windows at the inside edge of the flanking wings frame the courtyard. We vitalized the ground floor as well by creating ample fenestration with views into active amenity spaces. Next. And finally, this is a more frontal view from the opposite direction, so you can get a better view of the strong animated street wall, including the warm gray metal colonnade screen planted with beautiful vines. The significant street fronting garden spaces will create a lush landscape all along the South Capitol Street frontage. And this is the perfect segue for me to now turn it over to Rick Parisi of MPFP, who will tell you about our landscape design.
Thanks, Dan. Rick Parisi here, MPFP, Managing Principal. If you go to the next slide, please. This is our roof plan, actually. It's a plan, a full site plan, and it illustrates really how we're utilizing, the roof areas. One, for actually achieving our GAR, which we all know is challenging, but two, for creating, these garden spaces within the GAR areas, which are created with planting, right? And so we have our upper level roof where we have mechanical and we have some components of sedum area green roof. Then we have our main level roof where there are two private terraces There's an amenity terrace with an interior exterior, amenity space. Then there's the pool deck, a couple of plunge pools, and then more of a dining and barbecuing areas to the right side of the plan. What you do see here as well is you see the third floor courtyard that Dan mentioned. It's a sedum courtyard. It's only about 34 feet deep, 60 feet long, so it's very low. Then you see our second floor courtyard, which is a visual courtyard, and it is about 63 feet by 50 feet. And then you start to see the streetscape, and as Dan mentioned, the 15-foot setback. It's a setback that, if you go to the next slide, I'll start to walk through that. This setback here is made up of an alley of elm trees, and if you go one more slide over, you can see a section through that. So there's a 6-foot amenity band that's planted. We have a metal fence. We have a 14-foot sidewalk, the alley of trees that stagger. Then we have, against the building, we have native azaleas that are flowering, evergreen. We have some native grasses, some additional evergreen ground cover, and native perennials. So we get, a nice stepping landscape that gives, really creates a buffer. Now, this is in theory what we will do on this, but we know that the district is still studying the new South Capitol requirements, but this is what we believe we will do as of now. You can go to the next one, please. And this is a section on L. So on L, we are again doing this the same type of tree pit with 6 feet with a metal fence, evergreen plantings, some native grasses, some evergreen ground cover, and native perennials. Next, please. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the improvements that we've been working on with the church for many, many months. And what you see here is a composite plan. You see a garden against the church parking lot. So we're working with them to redo their parking lot, add planting on both the alley side and on South Capitol side, but for planting evergreen, stepped planting, perennials, and, really cleaning up the entire church property. The current church property has chain link fence of 3 different heights. It has some metal fences, and it has a lot of grass and kind of really, old landscape that's left. So we're going to beautify the whole thing. We're also going to treat the annex, and we'll show you some before and after slides next. Next. So this is a view looking east, northeast corner, and you see the current sign. You see the chain link fence of different heights. You see metal fence of another height. You see some gates. And if you go to the next one, what you see in this view, a new sign. We have a new landscape. We have a completely, new fence, metal fence that wraps around the entire building with new gates. And we're envisioning this as an evergreen, and native landscape that we're working on with the church, and we'll continue to work with them. And if you go to the next one. So this is a view of the alley with the annex. And what we've agreed to do out here is repoint the brick and paint it a more similar color to the church colors right now. And then re-landscape this and put a new fence here as well. So if you go to the next one, you'll see repointed, painted to match the church colors more closely. And you'll see the new fence that wraps around and the landscape and 2 flowering trees in the back of the annex. Next, please. This is our last view. So this is the view of the parking lot where you see, a couple of different sizes of chain link fence and a gate. There is a gate and access in here. So what we're doing here is we're going to actually add a landscape. There's a statue here. There's a small garden. We're going to redo that garden, add a landscape to buffer the planting. Use a planting buffer to buffer the parking. If you go to the next one, that's the last view. And you'll see that landscape, and you see the statue in there with the new fence and the new gate. And that's it. I'll turn it over. We're at 0.
I think it's Will.
Yeah, we can go
finish up.
we can go to the next slide. Good afternoon, I'm William Zide with Grove Slade. We prepared the CTR for this project, and I'll be going over the transportation components here. The site is located less than 1,000 feet from the Navy Yard Ballpark Metro Station and close to employment, recreation, retail, and grocery uses. The project will replace an existing surface parking lot with approximately 110 existing parking spaces with a new 263 unit building with 162 below grade spaces. This includes 25 EV charging spaces at opening and capacity to convert up to 25 additional EV spaces in the future. In an effort to comply with DDOT regulations and reduce vehicle pedestrian conflicts, the existing curb cut along South Capitol Street service lane will be closed, and the project will locate all vehicular and loading access along the existing north-south alley that is proposed to be widened to 20 feet along the site. This width is greater than DDOT's minimum of 16 feet for a two-way alley and is consistent with other alleys that serve similar buildings. The widening will continue through to the north through the curb cut to a widened curb cut. So it'll be a straight line up the east side of the building up to the street above. The project meets zoning requirements for vehicular parking, bike parking, and loading, and DDOT has issued a report expressing conditional support for the project. Next slide. A comprehensive transportation review was prepared for the project, including vehicular analyses at nearby intersections. The study confirmed the project will not generate traffic impacts requiring mitigation or trigger zoning mitigation for excess parking. The applicant worked with DDOT to develop a robust TDM plan, which includes not only DDOT's base plan, but also enhanced and enhanced plus components consistent with the project's size and parking supply. Next slide. The project will facilitate all vehicular access for parking and loading from the adjacent north-south public alley. The alley is currently 15 feet wide and will be widened to 20 feet with the project. This proposed condition has been reviewed by and is supported by DDOT. The project is proposing a PUDO zone and delivery zone along L Street. The 30-foot delivery space will be available to package or other short-term deliveries for not only this project, but any of the other nearby buildings. An internal bike storage room will be provided on the ground floor that will include spaces for cargo and tandem bikes, as well as outlets for charging e-bikes and scooters. Those will be provided at a rate consistent with DDOT standard TDM request. A robust TDM plan has been developed through coordination with DDOT, and the applicant is working with the community to propose additional alley traffic calming and pedestrian improvements. Details on any alley improvements and curbside changes will be reviewed and refined through the public space permitting process. Next slide. The DDOT report expresses conditional support for the project with the following two conditions. Condition 1 requested further refinements to the TDM plan. We have worked with DDOT over the last week to make these refinements, and an updated TDM plan satisfying this condition has been submitted to the record. Condition 2 requests additional language be provided to allow flexibility in design within the 15-foot building setback along South Capitol Street. This is consistent with what has been provided on other projects along the corridor. The applicant agrees to this condition and will propose such language be included in the order. The applicant will also continue to coordinate with DDOT on the items identified in the DDOT report, including coordination through the public space permitting process on any alley improvements and or curbside changes on L Street. Next slide. The TDM plan includes several items that go above and beyond DDOT's base TDM plan. I won't go through all these in detail, but a summary of enhanced and enhanced plus commitments are provided here. Next slide. This graphic reviews inbound maneuvers for planned loading operations. The proposed 20-foot alley width exceeds DDOT's minimum width of 16 feet for a two-way alley and will adequately accommodate truck turning movements while ensuring trucks will only make head-in and head-out maneuvers to and from the public streets. The 20 feet of alley width will provide clearance for both vehicles and loading vehicles to pass each other in opposing directions. 20-foot alleys adequately serve two-way traffic with back-end loading throughout the district, including larger buildings and buildings with significant retail uses. We are showing here that trucks can easily maneuver into the loading area using either the north-south alley exclusively or via the east-west alley. If vehicles were present in the east-west portion of the alley, loading for the 1100 South Capitol building would not be impacted, nor would that loading need to impact the east-west alley. These maneuvers are consistent with DDOT expectations for loading from an alleyway where back-end maneuvers are expected. Loading vehicles will not block any alley operations for any longer than would be typical and expected within an alley that is meant to serve garage and loading access. Further, with all access for buildings to the east located on the east-west alley, those vehicles can directly exit to or enter from Half Street without relying on the north-south alley. We have heard concerns about 3-point turns within the alley. However, the movements we see here include an initial turn to orient and a single backing maneuver, which is the target goal and standard for loading within an alley, and similar to a vehicle backing into a parking space. Loading vehicles serving this development will have no need to make any 3-point turns to turn around within the alley. With 263 units and no planned retail uses or potential for a large retail component, loading for the site will generally be limited to move-ins, move-outs, trash, and deliveries. Based on data for similar buildings without retail uses, the project is expected to generate an average of approximately 5 to 6 delivery vehicles per day. While what you see here is a 30-foot truck that we're testing, which is our design vehicle in DC, most residents will utilize smaller trucks for moving in and out, and most deliveries will arrive in delivery vans or similarly sized vehicles. These smaller delivery vehicles will also have the opportunity to utilize the proposed 30-foot loading zone along L Street, which will be located adjacent to the package room. We can go to the next slide. Outbound maneuvers are shown here with access to exit back to L Street to the north or directly east out to Half Street. Next slide. This slide provides some more detail on the existing and future alley components. We can see here that the adjacent buildings to the east provide all vehicular and loading access along the east-west alley. The project will include widening the alley by 5 feet to 20 feet total along the full property, and will locate the vehicular garage at the northern end of the alley to reduce the amount of vehicle traffic needing to pass through the other portions of the alley for this building. The loading area has been located opposite the east-west alley to provide maximum flexibility and maneuverability for loading vehicles. However, as shown on the previous slide, trucks could maneuver into the loading area within the north-south portion of the alley exclusively. Next slide. This slide provides a preview of potential improvements within the alley that have been identified based on requests from community and the ANC. The potential pedestrian pathway shown here in what looks like a purple color running north-south and then east-west at the bottom has been included at the specific request of the ANC to address their existing concerns of protecting pedestrians using the alley system as a cut-through. The feasibility, design, or inclusion of any of these improvements is subject to DDOT review and approval, and the final alley plan will be refined through the public space permitting process. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Christy to finish.
Thank you. The next set of our presentation is really just a detailed review of each of the elements of the standard of review. We have also put these, discuss these in detail in our pre-hearing submission, which is at Exhibit 13. So I think in the interest of time, I will go ahead and close our direct presentation, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions about the standard of review if you have them. We could pull up relevant slides, or we can go into questions about the design or transportation issues at this point. Chairman, it would be up to your pleasure there.
If we could hit, if we could just hit the standard of review briefly for not just us, but for those who are listening.
Absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So for a design review, there are applicable criteria that are looking at the design requirements for the sub area, design review requirements in Chapter 7, and then also looking at the general special exception standard. As the commission is well aware, the design review in a D zone design review does not follow the same procedures as a subtitle X Chapter 6 design review, which is something you see in other parts of the city. So it is very limited to these 3 criteria. Next slide, please. The first of those criteria is the 15-foot setback, which you can see, and you've heard about how we would be landscaping that. Next slide, please. We've also required to have a 1-to-1 setback above 110 feet, which is shown here. Next slide, please. The last of the 2 criteria are that we would not have any parking or loading entrances on South Capitol Street, and that we would have 75% of the street wall to the setback line, both of which we comply with. Next slide, please. For the design review criteria, these are the ones that are in Chapter 7 of Subtitle I. You have a variety of goals, and the first is that the project needs to help achieve the goals of the sub area. In this sub area, those goals are ensuring the preservation of the views to the Capitol, which you can see here in this image, and then furthering the development of high density mixed use corridors. The proposed building fills in this last remaining site and really creates that consistent street wall to frame that view. And the project, along with the important public space and exterior improvements for the church, really do help enhance that pedestrian experience. Next slide, please. The project needs to be in context with the neighborhood, and the building has been designed to respond to the different contexts, the massings, the design aesthetics that we see around this area, whether it be the more modern buildings that have been recently constructed or the church building that's immediately to the south. Next slide, please. We have created a very strong corner of this building to define that street pattern, but we've also maintained an interesting rhythm that we've heard about of these positive and negative voids to be respectful to the church to the south. Next slide, please. Mr. Zide spoke a lot about minimizing conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. All access will be taken to the building from the alley rather than L Street or South Capitol Street, and that is a requirement of both DDOT policy and the zoning regulations. The parking and loading have been designed to accommodate cars and trucks safely within this shared public space. We've extended the alley setback, as we've talked about. We've also talked a lot about how those trucks can make all the maneuvers through the north-south alley, or if available, they could make a maneuver through the 30-foot, but it's not required. And we've also seen that there is quite a few opportunities for other users of the alley to exit in different ways without even coming through the north-south alley. There were concerns from the ANC about double parking issues on L Street, and so we've been working closely with DDOT on this pickup and drop off and this curbside loading area. Both of those are intended to help kind of moderate with some of those traffic issues that are existing today. Next slide, please. We have minimized and articulated walls, and I will point out what's really nice about this project is the south facade of this project is on our lot line, but because we have obtained a light and air easement from the church, we are able to fully design, and we're looking, unfortunately, at L and South Capitol Street here. We'll look at this in a second, but we've been able to really fully design the south facade, which is very visible as you come up from further to the south, down from the Frederick Douglass Bridge up towards the Capitol. And it's beautiful, and that will stay that way because there is a light and air easement, and all of those windows are permitted windows. Next slide, please. LEED Gold is our designation that we are designing to achieve that certification. And there are a host of other environmental provisions that would satisfy minimizing impact on the environment. Next slide, please. We have really designed a building that treats South Capitol Street as the monumental civic boulevard that it is. And here on the corner, you can start to see that south facade as a full extension of the two public street facing facades. Next slide, please. Again, we've talked a lot about the service areas, and we just need to make sure that we've located access to parking and loading in such a way to recognize our proximity to residential users. We've also incorporated this nice third floor courtyard fronting towards the Kennedy on L so that there are greater separation from those residential windows of the Kennedy building that front on the alley. There's 50 feet for a large part of their facade, which is an excellent option to make sure that we're being respectful to that residential use. Next slide, please. We are required to submit views to and from the Capitol, which is here. Next slide, please. For the general special exception standard, we are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning regulations in the zone map. We're fully compliant with the zoning regulations. We have not requested any relief, and we are fully compliant with the sub-area requirements. We do not tend to adversely affect the use of neighboring property. We've worked closely with the church, as we've talked about. We've made accommodations to try to provide as much separation as possible from the Kennedy on L. And we have really created a nice ground floor design and landscaping that, along with those improvements on the church, are going to really reinvigorate the vibrancy of the South Capitol Street, kind of as a walkable pedestrian-oriented street. And those are the criteria. So There are no other criteria here. There's no comp plan analysis. There are no subtitle X chapter 6 analysis. These are the 3 areas of review that are required. And we submit, next slide, please. We submit that we do comply with all of them. We believe that it'll be an excellent addition to the South Capitol Street corridor. And we're really help the trend that's happened in making this a beautiful part of our city. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shaker and team. And Ms. Shaker, thank you for the last part and that analysis as well. And thanks to all. Let's see if we have any questions or comments. Let's start off in our usual fashion. Commissioner May.
Sure, I have a few questions. So there was a lot of emphasis on the improvements that are being done at the church, but the church is not actually part of this project, right?
No, the church is not part of the project. And we just wanted to show kind of what we are doing to South Capitol Street, since the focus of the design review is on how you create this as a civic boulevard. So no, those are not being requested to be approved by the Zoning Commission, more just for your information of what's going to happen to really help this entire portion of the square.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the thing that's confusing about it is that it almost feels like you're trying to portray this as a PUD and those are proffered benefits or something like that. But that's not.
No.
Things for the church has no bearing on our decision making, right?
That is correct. It was more just information to see what the final streetscape would look like, since it will be being done at the same time. But no, there are no proffers or amenities required, and none are being offered, just information.
Sure. Okay, so I have a question about the L Street pickup drop off and loading area. So I don't know what that street is like now. Is that all, is there on-street parking there for that stretch? And will this be displacing on-street metered parking or something?
Will, can you respond to that, please?
So it is metered parking today, and we did briefly discuss this with DDOT. And since we don't have a large retail component for the lower floor, they would generally support PUDO zones and removing some of that curbside parking.
Okay. And there's no bike lane through there, right? There's no protected bike lane like there is on I Street.
No.
Okay. All right. The reason I ask is that, I mean, I do frequent that area and have to do pickup, drop off kind of things at other apartment buildings. And between the bike lanes and the parking spaces, you very often wind up with vehicles stopped in the middle of the street because there's not enough room for the pickup and drop off. So I don't know that that's necessarily a concern, but I just would want to make sure that if there's going to be a pickup drop off, that it's generous enough, extends all the way to the corner so you don't have people kind of boxing it in from both sides. People also tend to park in those zones all the time, albeit for short periods of time. It's not just sort of pick somebody up, drop somebody off. It's park, you know, be in the building for 10 or 15 minutes and so on, which again leads to double parking and all that. It's a little messy in that neighborhood when it comes to those kinds of things. So that has to be considered carefully. Can we bring up, gosh, what slide was it? There was a slide that showed an image of the front of the building. Let me see if I can pull up the number. Sort of angled view. Come on. There we go. So slide number 18. Paul, could you possibly bring that up? So yeah, and if we could zoom in on the corner a little bit, the corner of the building. Yeah, one more click on that, and then just kind of bring the very corner edge of the building kind of into the center of the view to the extent that you can. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So there's a lot going on here in terms of the brick, and I'm hoping that maybe we could get a little bit of an explanation of exactly what's happening with the varying brick colors, the corner detail, what you referred to as fluted brick. I'm just trying to understand what's going on here, because it's, even though the building itself seems to be relatively simple in form, the actual facade is very complex and a little distracting from the overall form.
Mr. Lovitz, would you be able to answer Commissioner May's question?
Uh-oh.
Dan, are you still on the line? Are you muted, maybe?
It does not seem to be.
Mr. Young, do you see if he's on still? Can you tell?
Christy, he's in the attendee list, and maybe he needs to manually, because he's not a panelist, or
There we go.
maybe he needs to be manually unmuted.
Okay.
Paul, can
Mr.
you
Young,
help us?
could you help?
It looks like he's unmuting himself. I'm not sure why we can't hear him.
Can he be elevated to panelist?
I cannot. Maybe he should sign off and sign back in really quick.
He signed off.
Okay, we're hopefully he will just come back on. Maybe there's just a bit of a technical glitch. Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. I should have asked him my questions of him first, and then because I'm what I have left are architectural questions.
If we could, Mr. Young, if we could also elevate Richard Rubin from the Rubin Companies, he's the owner and the developer. We can put him in while we also wait for Dan to come back in. And
yeah, thank you. I've been put in. I think if Dan were talking, he would say that Commissioner May, that's a little bit of a function of the rendering. The brick is meant to be a palette that all blends together and make you more comfortable. Oh, there's Dan. Is that you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, so you don't need me to answer. Okay.
Oh, good, great. Commissioner May, the idea is that this building has a relatively monochromatic, but still with a nice level of detail, medium toned palette, and we always strive to introduce enough detail at the pedestrian level of a building to make sure that it's interesting and active and beautiful and makes a contribution to the streetscape and the public realm. And as I could hear Richard starting to say, the goal is that these various elements really are sort of soft and harmonious with each other. And so we have a combination.
I appreciate that, and I understand the design approach. So I'm just going to get very specific about my questions about this. Mm-hmm. So on the second floor and below the windows on the first floor, it looks like there's just a field of brick with a fairly wide variety, including some very brown colors, as opposed to the softer beiges that were in the material sample. So is that just a rendering thing that you have those, the darker reddish brownish bricks popping out, and then the white bricks popping out as well?
I think that's right. We did submit photography of the proposed palette, and I think perhaps it's reading a little stronger here than we're intending in the rend. I think that's a rendering issue.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then at the very corner, what is that piece made of? Is that a piece of steel that rides up to the top of the second floor?
No, that's a concrete framing detail, and you can see that the ground floor and the second floor basically are broken up into a series of panels. In a way, it's a detail that makes a nod to the sort of industrial character of our neighborhood to the south, where you have brick panels that are framed by
Okay.
linear masonry
All right.
elements.
I get that. So that is, you have in your submission, you have something labeled masonry, and then you have something labeled precast masonry, and they're both, like a fairly white limestone. What you're telling me is that that's going to be, that corner piece is actually a like a precast or a stone that's
Yes,
laid up like the brick essentially, but it's going to look as if it's continuous, or is it going to be a single piece? Because it's pretty slender to be a single piece.
it's gonna have joints at intervals.
Okay.
So it's going to be broken up
Okay.
into a series of elements that
Okay. All right. That's
basically
good.
create a banding and integrate it with
All
the
right.
brick.
Now let's talk about the window heads at the first floor. That looks like a steel beam. Is that right? Am I reading that right? Or is that just a brick that's got some in and out to it, for lack of a better word?
Um, that's that's intended also to be a masonry detail.
Okay. So what is that? Is that the same
That's the same
masonry or
precast.
masonry
Yes.
or something like that? Okay.
Yes.
It looks like it's a different color. And then that same detail is repeated above the second floor as well?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. And then what you call the fluted brick, is that just it's a vertical laid up brick with a rounded face?
It's actually it's basically soldier course brick, and it just steps
Yeah.
in and out. It's basically about a half an inch in depth, so it's pretty subtle, but it gives a beautiful shade and shadow,
Okay.
and just creates a texture, and again gathers those windows into a continuous band.
So it's not actually rounded. It's just
No,
a little
no,
bit
no.
of soldier course in and out. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And then what's happening at the bottom where at that corner where you seem to have another kind of soldier coursing going on with some different colors?
That's a flush soldier course. So
Okay.
that
But with varied brick.
yes, it's the same brick as the remainder of the building. So it's not intended to be a different coloration.
Okay. Yeah, it's another, I mean, these things they all seem just a little bit off, and we don't have a close enough in view of any of it to really understand what's happening. So this is why I'm asking these questions. I'm trying to understand it better. It certainly helps that the palette is more muted than the rendering shows it. It also helps that the palette is the same for the, that corner piece at the lower level and the rest of the field that we see on the first and the second floors. At the third floor, where we start to see the in and out of the brick, that brick seems to be much more uniform in color. Is that intentional as well?
No, it's all consistent.
It's all supposed to be the same,
I think
slightly varied palette.
it's a rendering issue. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes it very hard to see it. And it frankly doesn't show it as nicely as I think it probably will be. All right. So there, I don't know if there's a view in the presentation that shows the alley facade, or is that was just in the drawings?
That's in the drawings, Commissioner May. We could pull
Yeah.
those up. A18 and Mr. Young, if you could bring up our architectural plans from the pre-hearing submission, it is page 19. Yes. Page 19 of 62 of the pre-hearing submission drawings.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is that there are large portions of the alley wall that are blank. Oh, there were. Okay, so that was an earlier version that I looked at. The later
Yes.
version,
We-
slide 13, you put in windows. Okay.
Yes.
There are windows and there's some detailing, and we had worked with the Office of Planning. It felt like the first version was a bit lackluster, and so they asked.
Sure. Right, got it. Okay, yeah, for some reason I saw the first version, but not the second. All right, that's good. I don't need my questioning there. The last question I have is, I didn't see any indication that there were any use of solar panels on the roof of the building. Is that something that I missed, or is it something that you have considered and dismissed, or not even considered, or what's the deal with potential solar?
Can we please bring up Keith Amon and Jeff Hurst to come up, and they can talk about that.
Hello, this is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I can address that. We are investigating solar panels on the roof areas. Obviously, it's highly programmed and there's a lot of green space, but we have a solar development company that we are a co-owner of who are evaluating the project right now to see what we think we can do on the roof, but we don't have a final design.
Okay. It'd be nice to know that. I guess I only have one last comment to make on this, which is that, I mean, I think generally speaking, the building is very well composed and thoughtfully done, and you're thinking about all the right things, made the right kind of urban moves on it. But I have to say that stylistically, it seems really out of place for what's happening in that part of the city at this moment, or even what was happening in that part of the city, 50 or 60 years ago. It's more of a kind of Upper Connecticut Avenue or 16th Street kind of building than a South Capitol Street building. And I'm not saying that that's inherently problematic, but it doesn't seem to have, I mean, the character seems like a bit of a mismatch. That said, I mean, I'm not gonna, that's too big a thing for us to make an issue of at this point, but it just seems a little out of place from my perspective. Maybe my fellow commissioners don't feel that way, but that was just my immediate reaction to it. A nice building, but kind of not the building for this space where it seems to be either more modern, more industrial, more, referential to the rest of Southwest, or not that this is in Southwest, but what was across the street and a few blocks down. So anyway, that's it for me, Mr. Chairman. Happy to turn things over to Dr. Imamura.
All right, let's go to Dr. Imamura.
All right, thank you, Commissioner May. Thank you, Chairman Hood. I'll pick up where Commissioner May left off. Initially, I thought the same thing stylistically. It doesn't seem sort of in character with the neighborhood, but it does say Ramza in terms of its design gesture. I thought the design vocabulary was rather nice. The monochromatic color scheme, the rhythm of the punch windows. So it's well composed. I think Commissioner May's comment about it being rather busy on first 3 floors. It's just sort of because of the direction, it's the directional change in the bricks. But I see the intent. I think that will only be noticed at the pedestrian scale. So I don't really have any general concerns with that. I do have, I guess, one question for Mr. Lobitz about access to the west garden on the 2nd floor. I did see the maintenance hatch, but I'm sure maybe I missed it, but it doesn't seem as if that there's any tenant access to that garden space.
That's correct. There really is, there's maintenance access to it, and really we're seeing it as a visual amenity for all of the residents that face that courtyard. And of course, it's not a huge space. It's 63 feet wide and 50 feet deep. And so we felt that that making access there would impinge to a degree on the privacy of the people that face it. So really, it's more of a visual feature.
Okay. I see it more as a contemplative. It could be a contemplative space, and I was curious what sort of questions revolved around that, because I'm sure somebody asked, and some discussion about that within the student, whether it should be whether tenants should have access or not. Because it could be the way that Mr. Parisi has designed it. It's a rather nice space visually, and I think others should have access to it for contemplative space. I know that's important, especially given the past 2.5 years of pandemic. So just access, even I know they've got access to the rooftop, but multiple spaces would be nice. Also, I guess this is could be for Mr. Lobitz or Mr. Parisi. This ties in with Commissioner May's question about the curb. I'm more interested in curbside treatment on L Street, whether that's hardscape or a planter. In the rendered site plan, it shows that, I think it shows hardscape. And in just the site plan itself, it shows that there's maybe a planter there. So there's some inconsistencies in the drawing sets. So just wanted to clarify in the pickup and drop off what that curbside treatment is.
I think we have to pull that plan up. The rendered plan is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say you may want to go at slide number, I think it's slide number 3. You may want to go back and just double check your renderings there, your site plan drawings. And then overall, I thought, the selection of plant material was good. I was just curious about your selection of Solangiana on the rooftop. I assume that's where that's going in the penthouse.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we have petals everywhere.
Yeah, maybe we'll. I mean, we use a lot of crepe myrtles, on the rooftop. They do really well, and we've done a number of magnolias up there. But it's that one moment when they all fall.
Right. So no question. I mean, the colors is beautiful. It's just the moment when they all fall. In the main
Yeah. So we may adjust that.
Okay. All right. Very good. I certainly hope you take another look at that. Also appreciated the section of the Four Season Garden and the density, at least shown in the section. Thinking just seasonally about that. I know that's still up for DDOT to review, but appreciate that look at that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to Vice Chair Miller.
Okay, Vice Chair Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my fellow colleagues for your comments. Thank you to the applicants team, Ms. Scheicher, your team, and the architect, and the rest of you for bringing this design review case forward. I happen to think it's a beautifully designed building. I guess I like some of those buildings on Upper Connecticut Avenue and 16th Street that Mr. Commissioner May was referring to. But I understand what he's saying, that there's not a lot in this neighborhood, but I don't know why there couldn't be. I think it's very attractive, the brick and masonry materials and textures, and the beige medium coloring. And I think it will help activate the pedestrian experience around the building, along South Capitol particularly. Is there a rendering that shows the relationship between the building and the Kennedy Onell building that's to the east, I guess, across the alley? Is there a rendering that shows that? If so, if you could bring it up. But I'm just trying to. I realize this is going to. That Kennedy Onell building, they built it right up to the alley line, and it's got a lot of windows and balconies, and it's going to be affected, obviously, by the this building. But no one has a guaranteed light and air under court rulings about our zoning cases, and everyone kind of knew that development was going to happen on this vacant lot. But is there a rendering that just shows your proposed building with the Kennedy Onell to the east?
So Commissioner Miller, you can sort of see it in our PowerPoint, which is on page 16. If Mr. Young would bring that up. That is, I can tell you, if you have your plans there, I can tell you, I was given a different page number, but okay. So you can see here that the kind of the void between the Kennedy Onell, which is the darker building with the fen, and our building. And then what happens on the inside of the alley, we don't have a rendering of that, so to speak, but there is a bar. I was looking to see if I could go to a plan. If you could go a couple of sheets back, please. Maybe to A10, please. What sheet is that? A3 of the PowerPoint, please. There we go. One more in advanced, please. A5. There we go. Thank you. So you can see here how we have one bar, and then we have this third floor courtyard, and then we have the second bar, and their building comes to a good portion of to our second bar, our southern bar. So for the majority of their facade, they actually have a 50-foot setback from our building, which is one of the reasons why we placed this kind of shallower courtyard here, to provide greater separation to those windows, both for our residents and for their residents. But we don't have a view other than that one. And Mr. Lubitz, if you have something else to add.
Yes, we were very Commissioner Miller, we were very mindful of that issue, and that, as Christy said, that was the reason for creating this courtyard, and our layouts are oriented so the rooms really face either toward the street, toward the south, or toward the courtyard as much as possible, so that we minimize privacy issues across that alley, because we were mindful of that issue, definitely.
And I think you said that was the reason why you didn't want to do the additional balconies. Is that the same location where you didn't want to do the additional balconies that Office of Planning was recommending?
Yes, I think the suggestion was to add balconies inside that courtyard. And again, it's
right.
It's not a very large space. And I think if you add balconies there and somebody's out on the balcony with a friend or something, everybody that surrounds that space, and again, it's not an enormous space, their privacy is going to feel constrained, I think. So we really are not in favor of that idea, just for that very reason.
Okay, well, I think it's a reasonable explanation, and the Kennedy Onell people probably wouldn't be in favor of it either, I guess.
Right.
And they're already upset about the 20-foot alley not being wide enough. They think it should be 30 feet. I think all of your transportation analysis did rebut that, but I think we'll probably hear more from them in this hearing, and you'll have maybe further to say about it if they're here, after they testify. And I appreciate the lead gold and the consideration of solar in response to Commissioner May's question. This is in the D5 zone, which is a downtown zone, which is currently exempt from inclusionary zoning. So this is and you're not voluntarily offering to do any affordable units among the 263 market rate units. And I understand that fact, although we have a case pending that would change that regulation, which many of us have been anxious for it to have occurred a long time ago. And we had this conversation in other cases in the D5 zone in this general area, where sometimes they have offered voluntarily to do inclusionary zoning or otherwise affordable units, maybe not at the level that inclusionary zoning would require, but just to in response to the neighborhood need. And I realize that we need housing at all levels of income in the city. We have a housing shortage at all levels of income, and I understand the relationship between, if you're providing market rate housing, there can be a downward effect. There can be a positive effect on opening up other housing that those people in higher incomes might be otherwise taking up more affordable units somewhere else in the neighborhood. And you provided some data on that, which I appreciate. There was a lot of data that was there. But I realize that some people interpret, maybe our own council as well, that the normal comprehensive plan analysis doesn't apply to this type of design review case in a downtown zone. I happen to personally just disagree with that. I think the Home Rule Charter requirement that zoning shall not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan trumps any regulation that we might have done that said you don't have to do a normal comprehensive plan analysis. But so I appreciate that you did actually provide a comprehensive plan analysis in an abundance of caution. Maybe you knew that I had that interpretation, so I appreciate you providing all of that. But I do just generally find it problematic that we haven't dealt with the if not the whole downtown applicability issue, the D5 applicability issue. This is really outside of the central core of downtown. I'm not sure what this zone was under the previous to ZR16, or the but I realized that the whole density issue, that this is a receiving zone and using TDRs that there is an additional bonus density to get, which is what's supposed to be the offset for the inclusionary zoning or affordable units. But I would have liked to have seen, as the ANC clearly would have liked to have seen, some voluntary inclusionary zoning as part of this project. So if you want to comment, you can. I think you have a lot of comments in the record, and I understand where you are coming from. I understand where the ANC is coming from, though, and I happen to agree with the ANC on this particular point. We just haven't gotten around to changing our regulations, and even if we had, there may have been a delayed applicability date for projects that are already in the works that were based on certain financial models. So it may not have even applied if we had done this when we wanted to do this a couple of years ago. Anyway, if you want to comment, Ms. Scheiker, or anybody else, you can. But I just wanted to put those comments on the public record, since that's been my longstanding position. Thank you very much for your effort.
Yeah, I think that we've adequately brief that. And I will just say, the housing equity report does call for 7,900 units, market rate units here, and this project will further that. 3% of those units will come from this project. So I'm glad that you were able to see our comprehensive plan analysis and our racial equity analysis, and we appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the information you did provide on that point, all the studies and the data and the references to the mayor's housing equity report. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me go, Mr. Lovitz. I do have a question. I've heard a lot about the architecture from my colleagues, but I'm going to ask a very general question. It's architecture 101. When this was being designed and the input was given to you about achieving this project, what were your thoughts when you started looking at the type of design, the variety, the materials, the color of the brick? What were you trying to achieve here? Because I think I heard a couple of my colleagues say the style looks suitable somewhere else. Were you trying to do a variety in this area? What were you trying to achieve? Is what because I can tell you I'm 50-50 as far as when I looked at this, because I looked at another project we did and a couple of them already built. I've been here a while, and when I looked, actually my wife mentioned to me one day, we were riding down that particular street, and she said that building is off. and it's ironically, that's a building that this commission approved. So I'm just curious, what were you thinking about as you were developing this? What was the thought pattern?
Well, Chairman Hood, of course we put a lot of care and thought into what we felt would be an appropriate building here, and there is the desire for this significant location to it's the gateway to the Capitol. There is a goal to create a monumental boulevard toward the Capitol building, and so in our view, a building that grows out of this kind of a tradition of a masonry building with punched windows is very consistent and appropriate with trying to create something that has a certain monumentality, and yet of course we're trying to strike a balance, because at the same time it's a residential building, so we also want it to feel residential. We want there to be variety, to have a nice level of detail, especially at the street level. We think brick is a wonderful warm material. Of course, we have a historic church directly adjacent to us. Our goal also was to create a building that had an aesthetic relationship to some degree to that church, so that we felt that it harmonized with the character and the coloration and the composition of the church itself. And at the same time, we introduced detailing at the base that's quite industrial in character. This idea of concrete framing elements set with panels of brick within those rectangular panels. That's much more of a sort of industrial detail, which we think is quite appropriate to tie that element in at this location. And then that masonry, that metal screen wall with the open work metal piers along the face of our courtyard, also introduces an element that feels a bit industrial, and yet at the same time plays off the idea of trying to create a certain monumentality. The double height scale of it, I think, gives you a nice reading from a distance if you're looking from across the street, whereas if you're approaching the building from the south or from the north, so that in concert with the flanking wings, it creates a beautiful composition.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I think after I've heard your explanation, you've achieved all those competing interests of what you were trying to achieve, and I think that's probably how you. I'm saying this so I can understand how we got to that.
Thank you.
I do think that, I think you achieved that. I do think that, I did have questions at first, early on. I heard the conversation between you and Commissioner May. I was wondering why was this type here, but I think if that's what you were trying to achieve, especially with respect to some of the other characters that already exist. So I think you achieved that very well. This is a design review case. So I'm not going to ask about the affordable housing. I'm not going to ask, even though I do agree with Vice Chair Miller. I just think that we need to move and see where we go with that. I know there are other competing interests, not just this case, other cases that are going on in Southwest and other areas of the city of Southeast as well, that we need to look at. And I'm sure that there's some other things that will come into play. The only question I really have out of all that is the loading dock. I saw, and if we don't necessarily put it back up, you will recall when you were exiting, when the truck is exiting, a 30-foot truck is exiting, I think I understood you can either make that left, I think it was a left, or you can keep straight. And is that correct? You can either make that left.
That is correct. So on that slide there, we show both the left turn out and the through movement. They're just kind of overlap, so the truck can go either way.
So let me ask this question. Fundamentally, and I'm not a traffic expert, but I'm becoming one. I'm probably one now. Why can they make that left? Why should they be able to make that left? And if you want to put it back up and let's talk about it, and explain to me why they should make it. I don't know which number it is. I didn't write that down, but why should they make that left? Why not just keep straight out?
Why not keep going? So the left turn will get them straight back out to L Street to get back onto South Capitol Street the quickest without having to drive through the rest of the ballpark area. So if they go straight out to Half Street, which they could do, they'd have to go back around the block to go. The left turn out of the loading dock is a pretty smooth movement, so we don't really have much concern with it.
I think we need to go to the next slide. These are the inbounds.
This is the inbound. If we go to the
There we
next
go.
one here.
Okay, is that yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. That's it. So that's a two-way street, right? Where you make the left, the public
Two-way alley, yes.
two-way alley. That's what I mean. Okay, I'm trying to see what it reads. I can't see that. Okay, so that's a two-way alley. So when a truck or something is coming, how is that going to be managed anyway? What's going to cause the alley from not being jammed up? What's the issue? How are we going to control that?
So, as I noted in my testimony, we're anticipating for a building like this about 5 to 6 delivery vehicles per day, and that's over the course of the whole day. Some of those will use the proposed delivery space on L Street, but even assuming all 5 to 6 come back and use this over the course of, let's say, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 12 hours, we're looking at a vehicle every 2 hours. The trips associated with our site are relatively low. The Kennedy at L and the other building have access from both Half Street or via the north-south alley from L Street. So, I mean, I think it's just a function of only one every 2 hours. And, a lot of those deliveries kind of avoid happening during the peak periods when most of the residential traffic is coming in and out of the buildings. So given that there's 3 approaches to this alley system, and these are all residential buildings without very large retail components, if you will, driving traffic throughout the day, we don't anticipate a lot of conflicts. I mean, this is the target that you want, is to get the loading off the public street onto the alley, and you back in from the alley, and that's what we designed this for.
Okay, I appreciate it, but Mrs. Ed, I'm gonna think about you every time I'm downtown and I see all those alleys that are not working. I was just curious. I'm just curious why we were going there, but if making that left is easier, it's not a big deal. I'm not gonna push it. I just observe when I'm downtown all the problems that have been created. Not saying it happened here, but I think some of those developers as well had those same intentions of what I'm hearing here. And then the residents have problems, and when they do come in front of us, some of them are upset, and likely so. And sometimes I'm upset, but I'm just hoping that we thought it through. I'm not sure if somebody's going to be managing that because it's not a PUD. I can't get into all that, but I'm sure to make it work and for people to utilize it, you're going to have to make it work. So thank you for that. I don't have any other questions on that. Anybody have any second round questions? All right, let's go to ANC Commissioner. I think we have Chairman Daniels. All right, Chairman
Evening,
Daniels.
everyone. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
Chairman Hood.
How are you? How are you? Good to see you. It's time for you to right now just ask any questions and we'll get your report later. Any questions?
Sure. I don't really have any questions. I don't have any. I do have the report and some comments here. Not really any questions right now. I just have some feedback, some comments.
I'm on mute. So we'll come back to you since you don't have any questions. Let's go to the Office of Planning and District Department of Transportation at this time. Mr. Cochran, and then I think we have Mr. Zimmerman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to find my testimony. Okay. I'm Steve Cochran with the DC Office of Planning for this case. An OP is recommending that the board approve the design review application for this residential project at 1100 South Capitol Street. The review is a special exception, subject to the usual standards that are in Subtitle X, Chapter 9, also to the downtown design review criteria and procedures in Subtitle I, Section 701.2, and third, the Subtitle I, Sections 616's very specific criteria for the MN South Capitol Street subarea in downtown's D5 zone. Subtitle X, Section 601.1, which usually governs design review, explicitly exempts projects in these subareas from the broader review process and criteria in X 604. So our report and our testimony doesn't consider that. But as we've discussed in the report, though, the project meets the subareas criteria. It also meets the I Chapter 7 design review criteria and the X Chapter 9 special exception criteria. Now, our recommendation of approval is subject to two conditions. The first one was included in OP's report. It addresses the location and the lighting of signage and ornament. This condition is one that the applicant has accepted, and for the specific wording, I just refer you to our report. As the applicant noted today, OP has also recommended a second condition. This condition, the applicant said they've agreed to, and it would read, and I'm giving you the exact wording, for the life of the project, the applicant shall maintain a 5-foot deep setback along its property line adjacent to the eastern alley, up to a height of 16 feet. And I'll submit that later if you need it for the any record. OP had also asked the applicant to respond to two other matters. To clarify DDOT's response to the proposed short-term loading on L Street. Well, the applicant covered that today, and DDOT is also here today if you want to ask additional clarifying questions about that. OP had also asked the applicant to consider, as you know, providing those additional balconies in the east-facing courtyard at the rear of the project. The applicant has explained why it has reservations about this today, and it's pretty clear that some commissioners seem to agree with this. And accordingly, OP is withdrawing the suggestion for the balconies on that east-facing courtyard. Overall, the project's architectural design has the sobriety and the dignity that's appropriate to corridor that frames an important view of the national capital, while it also enhances the local pedestrian experience. And that's why OP recommends that you approve it. That concludes our testimony, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Hold tight. We're going to come back to you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Good evening, Chairman Hood and members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Aaron Zimmerman, Development Review Program Manager with DDOT. DDOT is supportive of the applicant's proposal for 1100 South Capitol Street Southeast. In our November 7th, 2022 report, we recommended approval with two conditions. As you heard in Mr. Zeid's presentation, the applicant has agreed to both of these conditions and has documented them in their response letter and revised TDM plan, which are exhibits 17 and 18 on the record. With these included in the zoning order, DDOT has no objection to the approval of this design review application. We look forward to continuing to work with the applicant as they go through public space permitting. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank you both. Let's see if we have any questions of OP or DDOT. Commissioner May. Okay, Commissioner Ema Moore
I do not. Thank you both.
and Vice Chair Miller.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Cochran and Mr. Zimmerman, for your reports.
I too want to thank you both for your reports. And I will say that you heard the conversation from the Vice Chair about these zones. So I like to always say that Mr. Cochran was the author. But anyway, what we would like to do is probably I know Ms. Steingass is listening. Let's see what we can do to move these things along. Those concerns about the chair. I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm sure there are other fundamental issues belonging to this why we didn't do it at the time. But let's see where we are. We'll get an update at our next meeting. Just I would ask the Vice Chair to help me remember, and I'm putting it out to some Ms. Steingass if you could remember to let's talk about that at our next meeting. And Ms. Sheldon, if you can help me remember. Ms. Shiker, do you have any either questions for either DDOT or Office of Planning?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. You know, it's funny when you look at the screen because when you're talking to somebody, somebody must move and then it blinks and their picture moves over somewhere else. So anyway, Chairman Daniels, do you have any questions of either Office of Planning or DDOT?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Well, now thank you both. Let's go to ANC 6D. Chairman Daniels, you may begin.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, everyone, for being here as well. I just want to say, and I hope that my thoughts are coherent here. So the ANC, we are opposing this project, and I'll just get to the one thing here when it comes to design review. Design reviews are, we've said this before as well with these projects, allowed to go beyond the aesthetic appeal and must assess how these projects achieve the goals of the District of Columbia. Right now, the district's goals, this D5 zone, is causing a lot of even more crisis here when it comes to the affordable housing crisis that we have. The applicant here, as I believe Commissioner Miller might have said, hasn't even attempted to work with the ANC to offer any sort of affordable housing component. I currently represent 18,000 residents here in Navy Yard. This neighborhood is new. This neighborhood has lots of new residents to the district. We're struggling. We're struggling to keep residents here. We're struggling to keep families here. With these market rate rentals, we continue to allow this trend of very wealthy residents moving to our neighborhood for a short period of time because they're moving to the trendy neighborhood. Navy Yard, it's beautiful, it's new, it's modern, it's the trendy place to be for a year before residents realize that they can move outside of the district. They can move far outside of the district in order to have a quality of life that they can't get here in the city. Right now, moving into this building, you would have to make at least $150,000. I'm pretty sure that when leasing comes about, similar to other properties here, I represent 21 high rises in Navy Yard. Every single one of them, 85% of those, you have to show that you make 5 times the monthly rent. Average rent here right now is $2,500 a month for a 1-bedroom unit. So we're creating what one of my colleagues called a wealthy ghetto of very wealthy residents that are allowed to live in this neighborhood. It's a complete disservice to the neighborhood, to the families that want to stay here, to the families that cannot afford to remain in this neighborhood. And again, I know that we're talking about design review, but we have to look beyond the aesthetics of these designs and what's actually happening on the ground level. It may be above the grade of the commission here. It has to be dealt with. These D5 zones, especially when we are not talking about being in the heart of downtown DC. We're talking about a neighborhood where it's not sustainable. What we're building, what's going on is not sustainable. I really appreciate the applicant going back and forth with the ANC regarding the process of market rate rentals and what the housing equity report said and what they're adding based on that housing equity report. But as I said to Richard Rubin in our last meeting, the question that I asked is, how long is it going to take for this balance to be achieved in the city when it comes to housing? How many more years do we all have to wait before finally we're balanced with rentals? Not every resident in the district can afford a $2,500 a month tiny one-bedroom unit. And again, we are creating a wealthy ghetto in this neighborhood of residents who live here for a year and they're gone. Believe me when I say that. I've been in this position for 4 years. Every time that I go around getting signatures and chat with residents, they're not there a year later. They live here for a year, they move out. From the developer's perspective, their side of the fence, it doesn't really matter because they can charge whatever they want for these units, and there's always going to be someone in line to come rent after that resident that realizes it's not sustainable has long gone. Again, this has to be dealt with as from a policy position. These D5 zones are hurting us. It's hurting the residents here that cannot sustain themselves in this neighborhood. That's our main point of objection to this. I do want to say thank you to the applicant and Christine and the rest of the team. They really did listen to all of our concerns. Outside of the affordable housing component, they did listen to all of our concerns regarding the pet waste stations, a dog run on the rooftop that actually works. We have a lot of properties that have dog runs that do not work at all, but they have filtration system that they are planning, which is great. The lighting element, the landscaping and the betterment of the sidewalks and the streetscape around the property. We really appreciate that line by line response to the ANC. Right now, we're just, I don't know what else to say. We just really have residents that are struggling with all of these new luxury buildings that come up next to one another. We don't see what the community benefit is here. We don't see any community benefit. We even said to them, it'd be great if these were at least home ownership opportunities, such that residents could take advantage of the first-time home buyer funds that are available in the district, which are mighty. At least they could have homes that they are invested in, and that we would have multiple residents owning property here in the district. But no, unfortunately, we have another luxury rental building that's driving out residents, and that's creating an unsustainable model. This housing equity report, I don't know what the logic and the numbers are behind this, because it's not working. We're adding more and more market rate units, and it's not working. It's not lowering the rental rates that our residents are paying. I do hope that DDOT also includes those PUDO zones. And I do want to say to the point of what someone was saying earlier regarding PUDO and delivery, we had a meeting with DDOT yesterday at their headquarters. These PUDO zones, first of all, they're not being enforced by DPW. They're not working. And also, I do want to point out to the commission here that these PUDO zones are needed throughout the city, but I do want to point out that the PUDO zones are also being interpreted by parking enforcement in completely different ways. Parking enforcement are interpreting those zones as you're either picking up or dropping off a person, or you are stepping out to go into the coffee shop and come back to your car. So right now they're interpreting them in completely different ways, and residents are upset about that. So I hope that the commission understands that we do need these zones, but they have to be consistently enforced based on the same criteria. That's not happening right now. We have a lot of confused residents that are getting tickets, and they're thankfully getting adjudicated and written off because everyone's interpreting what those zones mean in different ways, including DDOT. DDOT's explanation yesterday in their own offices were in conflict with what DPW is doing. So I just want to point that out. And that's pretty much all I have to say regarding this.
Thank you, Chairman Dans. But I do want to tell you, in those zones, we don't necessarily have any enforcement powers. But what I will say is it's important, and I don't want to put any work back on the ANC, but it's important that ANCs and civic associations work along with the leadership to make sure that it trickles down to those who are coming out writing those tickets and doing that. That way we get all on the same page, because you're exactly right. Everybody always operates to a different book. And that causes a problem. And it's not necessarily the zoning, nothing the zoning. All we can do as citizens ourselves is do the exact same thing that you all do. Probably you'll get more response because you're an ANC commissioner as opposed to us. But let's just stay in the battle. That's unfortunately what we have to do. And I will say this, I'm just curious, how did you get over I guess over the past 2 years or so, or how many years you've been a commissioner? How did you get 18,000 to the development, but you won't have it after the redistricting, I know that. But how did you get 18,000?
Yeah,
That
it's a lot. It's a lot. I smile. It's a lot. This is beyond a full-time job being a commissioner in this particular neighborhood. We've had an influx of residents. The amount of residents that have moved here, I knew the number was over 12,000 at one point, because when the Board of Elections prints out the list of registered voters, my list even 4 years ago I think was about 8,000, and every commissioner is supposed to represent 2,000 residents. Registered voters were 8,000, and I talked to so many more people that were not registered yet that were living here. And then the most recent term before running was about 12,000 residents, and I thought I was representing. Today I was talking to Michael Stevens, president of the BID here. We had a meeting, and he said, "Yeah, right now we're at 18,000 residents here in the Navy Yard." In the Navy Yard community, and then part of the new Buzzard Point residents. So I mean, I know myself, I represent 21 high rises myself. So yeah, there's a ton of residents that live here. So that's where we currently are. And I know that a lot of new people are moving here, but we're losing a lot of residents that have just found the neighborhood to be unsustainable, that they don't understand why they're paying 25 to 6,800 for a rental unit where they can go get a mortgage somewhere else outside of the district.
Okay. Point well taken. Thank you.
And Chair, if you don't mind, if I may also add, I know that you were asking, or one of the commissioners mentioned the aesthetic of the building, and I think the building does look like a building you might find on Connecticut Avenue. I do want to add that across the board, our commission, we were pretty happy with the way the building looked. It looks, as one of my colleagues said, more like a building you'd find in New York. And I know the developer is from New York, but we were pretty happy with that. It actually gives a little bit of variety to the super modern and super industrial feel of the neighborhood. It puts something different on that corner, and I also like the look of the property.
Okay, so I think that's good, but I will tell you, Chairman, I've been around a while, and I know when you've been around a while, you've seen a lot. I remember when Southwest and Southeast in that area was not. And I always say Southwest because I remember the conversations that we had under the Andy Altman era when we said this will never get done. Guess what? It's done. The commissioners at the time were pushing for it, and now we got it, and it's full speed ahead. And now we're trying to say, hey, wait a minute, hold up here. Let's slow up. Let's find out where the affordable housing went. That was not what we anticipated. And that happens not just in that area, but other areas as well. We push for things, and then when we start getting it, it's like the floodgates have opened, and we have to kind of strike that balance. But I do agree, and I'm hoping that we can get on this, your concern, the ANC's concern, sooner than later. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are going to be some other things that come up, so stay tuned. I'm going to follow the vice chair, and we're going to see if we can see where this is, because this is not the first time this has been mentioned. It's been mentioned previously, but not necessarily this particular case. It's been mentioned prior to this. So even at that, let me just see what others have to say. Commissioner May, any questions or comments?
No, I appreciate the Herculean task that the chairman has taken on, representing so many people in his SMD. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Emma Moore.
All in a single bound. So I echo Commissioner May's comment.
And Vice Chair Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chair Daniels, for all your work in ANC 6D and your work on this project and all the comments. I appreciate and pretty much agree with all the comments you made here tonight. So thank you very much.
I too want to thank you and the commission. It's a lot going on. Appreciate all the work you all do as volunteers. That does not go unnoticed with us. And I'm sure the rest of the city appreciate your work. And you are listened to. Sometimes we have other competing things we have to deal with, the law and everything else that we have to try to make this work. But we just have to stay steadfast and do what we have to do. So I appreciate your testimony and just stay tuned, I would say. Let's see, Ms. Schleicher, you have any comments of the ANC, cross of the ANC?
I don't. Thank you so much.
Okay, Chairman Daniels, again, thank you for all you're doing with the 18,000 or whatever you have now. So, and your commission as well.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Okay, Michelle, and I didn't see any other government reports other than what we've already talked about. If somebody did, they can holler it out. If not, we will keep moving. 1 second. Let's go to, do we have anyone, Michelle, who's here to testify in support, opposition, or undeclared?
We do have a list. I'm going to go down the list. Some of the proponents may be part of Ms. Scheiker's team, and if so, she can let us know. But I'll call out the names. Andrew Orchuli.
He's part of our team.
Tad Romer.
He's part of our team.
I hope Brandis Elliott is. Let's see who is next. Chris Lee.
He's part of our team.
Okay. Marcelo Lopez.
He's part of our team.
Weston Burz.
He's part of our team.
Yep. Keith Amon.
He's part of our team.
Michael Minnis.
He's part of our team.
Okay. And so then that leaves only one person, and that person is an opponent, and that is Lauren Fassett on behalf of the Kennedy on L condominium.
Okay, let's bring up Ms. Fassett. Michelle, I was wondering, let me just ask this. I noticed this the other night too. The team members, can they put, is some kind of way we can find out who's on the team? I don't know. Can we put like a T or a team or something? Because I did that the other night as well. Something we need to look into.
Well, it comes up color coded, but the problem is we've had individuals actually click that they're part of the team, so it doesn't quite work well.
Okay, I knew it was one thing about this. It's easy for me to, but I know it's a whole lot of things that go on in the background. So just disregard what I said. We'll just keep doing it this way.
We have it set up that way, but if others decide to click that they're part of the team, it doesn't really, it defeats the purpose.
Okay,
that
so
we
that's
set
one
up.
thing. We can take that out of there. Okay, let's go to Ms. Lauren Fawcett, I think is the name. Ms. Fawcett, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Hood and members of the Zoning Commission. You can hear me, correct? Okay,
Yes,
great.
we can. Yes, we can.
So I'm Lauren Fassett. I'm the president of the Kennedy on L Condominium Board of Directors. And I thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony regarding this residential building at 1100 South Capitol Street Southeast. It is located adjacent to my building, the Kennedy on L at 37 L Street. And we wish to express our strong reservation about the 1100 South Capitol's proposed loading dock, the entrance and access point that's located off the north-south alley. We assess that the Rubin Companies has grossly underestimated the width of the alley that's required to sufficiently and safely access and accommodate the loading dock. And as you know from the Rubin Company's own design filings, they already recognized that the current width of 15 feet was too narrow. And as requested by the Office of Planning, they agreed to accommodate the existing 5-foot easement via a 5-foot setback in its design for the first 2 stories of its building. This plan setback widens the north-south alley to 20 feet total, and we do commend this decision, but we believe it's insufficient for the safe and efficient use of their loading dock, as the current design still keeps this highly trafficked north-south alley excessively narrow. We assert that they should increase the setback by an additional 10 feet and create a 30-foot wide north-south alley. This would allow trucks destined for 1100 South Capitol's loading dock to access it directly from the north-south alley. As the Rubin Company's own zoning case exhibit shows, large delivery, moving, trash trucks, and residents of its 263 units, along with the anticipated 162 personal vehicles and the potential future retail space delivery trucks, will not be able to make turns from the north-south alley into the loading dock due to the narrowness. Specifically, they will have to execute a 3-point turn using the larger east-west alley to back into the loading dock. Tonight's presenters indicated that trucks can, in fact, turn into the loading dock from the north-south alley directly, but that is belied by all of the images I've seen. The images only show trucks exiting the loading dock onto the north-south alley, not backing in. And further, regardless of the possibility that larger trucks could turn directly off the north-south alley, they will choose to utilize the east-west alley because it is wider and easier. We're deeply alarmed by DDOT's determination of no objection. We fear they didn't adequately review the specifics of the application and the public safety implications of a blind three-point turn. When they're backing in from the east-west alley, they will not have any visual of pedestrians or traffic cars coming along the north-south alley, which is used constantly by people driving, by people walking to the building back doors, especially during national baseball games. There's a ton of traffic, pedestrian traffic, traversing that alley toward the stadium. So we believe it's critically important that the alley be widened to 30 feet for the following reasons. First, it would ensure that this new building could access its loading dock in the most efficient way by providing direct access. Second, it would prevent serious harm to other pedestrians and drivers. As I just discussed, they right now have to back from the east-west alley blindly without visibility into pedestrians and vehicular traffic in the north-south alley. This is in violation of DC's goal of commitment to Vision Zero. It's also a significant public safety hazard to cars and pedestrians walking down the north-south alley. Right in the back of the east-west alley, we have the Kennedy on L's back entrance, parking garage entrance, loading dock entrance, Coda on Half's back entrance, garage entrance, and loading dock entrance. The Rubin Company did submit a proposed alley management and loading operation plan, which they emailed us a copy, but the two proposed mirrors that they have suggested wouldn't adequately mitigate this public safety issue. Additionally, adding a speed bump in the north-south alley, while appreciated, doesn't improve the safety issues of this three-point blind turn coming from the east-west alley. Similarly, the proposed no parking pedestrian zone in the east-west alley, as shown in their proposal, it lacks value because if you look at the way that their trucks have to go into the east-west alley, that would drive right through this alleged pedestrian zone. So this 10-foot increase in the north-south alley would also allow them to achieve the easier turning movements that the Office of Planning requested them to consider. Now, again, we do appreciate the 5-foot setback, but we do not believe that that's sufficient. We think that a total setback of 15 feet, making the alley 30 feet wide, would be best for public safety and avoid a dangerous situation. It would also eliminate a totally unnecessary burden on the Kennedy on L and Coda on Half residents who will literally be trapped in their respective garages and won't be able to get out during peak hours when these trucks are turning. Particularly the Kennedy on L garage is at the end of the east-west alley where it intersects with the north-south alley. So that will be directly blocked by these three-point turns. It's not a matter of can we go left down the east-west alley to get out. We won't be able to get out of the garage at all because there will be trucks in the way. It'll also potentially affect the access to the loading docks because people will be coming, trucks presumably will be coming to the new project, 8 times a day, 7 days a week for their loading bays for moving in reservations, as this is a rental, and we know there'll be significant turnover with 263 units being rented, as well as the trash pickup and other daily package deliveries. Also, we think the 10-foot increase would limit the likelihood of the inevitable lane blockage that's going to happen in the north-south alley from idling vehicles waiting to pick up or drop off residents for the 1100 South Capitol, or when cars have stopped, we need a wider space for other cars to be able to pass those stopped vehicles. Again, there will be 162 additional cars accessing that alley to get into the 1100 South Capitol's parking garage entrance too. So that'll further increase the traffic in this very small, narrow alley. So we believe that we've demonstrated the 30-foot alley is critical to public safety and welfare of both 1100 South Capitol's future residents and their neighbors. The widening of the alley will ensure access to their residential parking garage and loading dock directly from the north-south alley without requiring the use of the east-west alley. And most importantly, this 10-foot setback addition will not significantly impact 1100 South Capitol's overall square footage, because even now their proposed design shows that they're only extending the setback to the height of approximately 20 feet where their garage entrance and loading dock is, not where they have residential units. So in conclusion, we determine it's extremely beneficial to 1100 South Capitol property, its future residents, and the adjacent residents, particularly at the Kennedy on L and Coda on Half, for the north-south alley to be widened to 30 feet via a total setback of 15 feet. We urgently request that you consider our testimony and evaluate the design and require the ribbon companies to create a revised design that accommodates a 30-foot north-south alley. Thank you for your time and continued service. I appreciate it.
Thank you, President Fossett. We appreciate your coming down to represent the Kennedy on L. I do have a question, and I believe you have. Have you obviously had conversations with the applicant or the organization? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Hood. We had one in-person meeting where they just discussed their design plan. And then there was an email sending us the proposed alley management response that I believe was requested perhaps by DDOT. I'm not 100% sure of that. Previous conversations I think may have been between the developer, but we as the board formed and took over. So we've had emails setting up the meeting, one meeting about the overall design plan, and that we've agreed to future meetings about the impact of construction when the project starts. But that's the extent of the communication.
Okay. All right, let me see what my other colleagues have. Commissioner May, anything?
Yeah, so you cited the 5 trucks a day, 7 days a week. We heard from the applicant something more like 5 trucks a day. Where'd you get your numbers from?
My number comes from an estimate of 2 to 3 move-in window slots per day, plus the trash trucks coming probably bi-weekly, and then delivery trucks that would be coming daily from the various, Amazon and other packagings that would be coming.
So you basically did your own estimate.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I guess I don't really have more questions. I just would want to point out, while we appreciate the concern, as alleys go, this is already a reasonably sized alley at 15 feet. There are a lot of 15-foot alleys, even in urban areas. And it is very common for DDOT to recommend expanding to 20 feet, which is a pretty standard dimension. And I do not recall with any of the cases that we've been involved in where DDOT recommended, or even anybody recommended going to more than 20 feet. I mean, I think that's a lot. And you really are helped by the fact that you've got the other east-west alley as well. It's not just a north-south where I could see there being more traffic tie-ups. The fact that you've got that other outlet that goes to Half Street makes it for a pretty good alley configuration compared to many of the ones that we have seen. So, I mean, that's just an observation from us. I appreciate that you have that concern, but I just want to say this is pretty good compared to most of what we see. And if there really were problems with 20-foot alleys in the city, I'm sure we would have DDOT recommending greater widths. So that's just my comment.
I appreciate that, certainly. I think given the proximity to the baseball stadium, that roads often get closed, or you're not able to turn off of M Street onto Half Street, or sometimes into the north-south alley. There's a lot of restrictions, certainly, for car access that could make a lot of traffic jams back there. And the fact that our garage, just the location of our garage entrance right at that corner, every time the truck does this turn is of particular concern here, versus if our garage entrance were on another corner or other side of our building and this was just our loading dock area itself. So that I think that's our biggest issue is really that there's so much in this very tight space, and particularly going to be blocking our garage entrance with these turns. And if they could just turn straight from the north-south alley with a little bit more width, that would just really alleviate the congestion and potential for pedestrian injuries, et cetera, in the alley. But thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Edenmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bassett, thank you for coming before the commission tonight. It's a good example for the rest of the public to see why it's important to participate in this kind of decision. That your concerns do have merit. It's important to be part of that process. I don't have any particular questions, but certainly appreciate your concern the Montague.
Okay, Vice Chair Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Hassett, for your testimony this evening on behalf of the Kennedy on L condominium. So it is a condominium. It isn't all luxury rental in that neighborhood. You own your home. You own your home, right?
Yes, just, yep. It's a rare bird for a condo, yes.
Okay. That was fresh in my mind, so I just thought I'd ask you that question. In addition to the comment that Commissioner May made, which I would tend to agree with in terms of what we see in other places, not that it's necessarily working in other places, as the Chairman Hood pointed out downtown. It's anecdotal from what we all see from time to time, but I don't have a question for you really, but I guess if the applicant in their rebuttal doesn't address what your statement about not having much of an effect, that 10 additional feet of width would not affect their project that much. I want to just hear from them directly what effect it would be on the project. Would they lose any units? What would be compromised just from their perspective, not in a big comprehensive analysis way, but just what is the effect? So if the applicant would address that when we get to their rebuttal of testimony, I would appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. But thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I actually started to do that when I was asking Ms. Fassett, President Fassett, questions. I started to do it then, but I figured I would wait because I already know what the answer is going to be. But I have another remedy, and I'll bring that up when they come back for rebuttal. So, well, not remedy. I have another suggestion, which is not a whole lot, but I'm going to make it. So, Ms. Fassett, I think. Let me see. Ms. Stryker, do you have any questions of Ms. Fassett?
I don't. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and hopefully, I'll just say it now. I'm going to always push for the applicant and the residents to work together. So continue those conversations. You've heard the issue, what's going on. I would ask that you all reach out to Ms. Fassett and that team at the Kennedy on L and work with them and see how we can coexist, because we have to be neighbors. Let's see how we can make it work. That's my suggestion. So if we can do that, I would greatly appreciate it, depending upon how this moves. All right. Thank you, Ms. Fassett. Let's see where we are. Michelle, we don't have anybody else, right? That was the only person. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Stryker, if you can do your closing, you can do any rebuttal and then your closing.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. So just to touch on the issues that the condo board president brought up, just a couple of things. We had worked closely with DDOT. 20 feet is an ideal width for an alley. 16 is their minimum. We have shown today, which we had not previously shown, that all of the truck movements can be made in the north-south alley. So that 20 feet is sufficient. And as Mr. Zide testified, it is quite an easy maneuver compared to others. With respect to the volume, we expect only 5 to 6 deliveries a day. And those, again, are with primarily smaller trucks. There is no retail here. So the concern with greater trucks or larger trucks because of retail use, we do not have retail in the building. And our estimates come based on the operation of the large building 10K of just a block up that is operated by the same owner. As to the impact, if we did incorporate this 10 feet, as Commissioner Miller asked us to address, we did look at it. So as Ms. Fassett said, our building is cantilevered. It's at about 18 feet above grade. It's cantilevered out that 5 feet. But you can't cantilever out indefinitely before it becomes prohibitively expensive. So we looked at how far could you cantilever and what would you do? And it was, we'd be cutting about 8 to 10 feet off the building, and that results in a loss of about 22 units, as well as a reduction in size of the other 22 units. We had been, as you heard, we had 32% 2 and 3 bedrooms here, trying to have a little bit larger units. And so I think that because the alley is at a DDOT standard size and that there would be a resulting loss in residential units, which is something that is encouraged by the district right now, that we did not think that adding that additional 10 feet would be necessary or appropriate. I will say that the loading and alley operation plan that Ms. Fassett referenced was not requested by DDOT. DDOT has had no issues with our loading. They have been happy with it from the very beginning. We did that as a neighborly offer to try to put some like rules and regulations on the use of this shared public space so that we could work together. And I think Chairman Hood, we can commit that we will continue to work with the condo board. And I think that actually in it, and she attached it to her document, you know, we specifically say that we'll have a person who can be on call if there are any issues, that we can come back and meet together. And we want to continue to work with them for both pedestrian and vehicular safety in that alley. And so we can commit to doing that as well. And with that, I would close. That's the only rebuttal we would offer. I would say that we feel that we have established the standard, the three criteria or the three elements of criteria of the standard of review. And we are excited to move forward with this project. And we would ask that the Zoning Commission take action as soon as they felt that they were able to, so that we could move forward with the project. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Striker. Any follow-up questions or comments, Commissioner May?
No, but did the ANC have should they have the opportunity to cross on the rebuttal?
Yeah, I'm going to give it, even though Ms. Scheicher did it. Normally we don't cross the attorneys, but some of what she wrote, somebody on her team, unless it's a question she can answer, but somebody on the team can answer that. So yeah, I'm gonna go to them after I finish with us.
Okay. Cool. I got nothing to say.
Okay. Commissioner Eamon Moore. Okay, and Vice Chair Miller.
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Scheicher, for all the information you have provided.
Okay. And Chairman Daniels, I did miss you with Ms. Fassett. Did you have any questions for Ms. Fassett or for what you had on, you heard from rebuttal from Ms. Scheicher? If we can bring him back up.
Does not look like he is on anymore.
Okay. All right. All right, so Ms. Scheicher has given us her closing. We thank you. Commissioners, what is your feel for this case? I'm going to set it down for some dates. So what is your pleasure? Let me hear from everybody. Commissioner May.
Mr. Chair, I don't see any substantive issues that we need to continue to consider at length. And I don't believe there are any requests for additional information. So I would be prepared to move forward tonight if that was the inclination of the other commissioners.
Okay. And Commissioner Eamon Moore.
I would like to move forward.
The chairman may have dropped off. Is that possible?
No, I'm back. I'm dropping.
Okay. You warned me early in the meeting, so I thought I suddenly was on duty.
That was the wrong call. I hung up.
This was your moment, Vice Chair Miller.
All right, Vice Chair Miller.
Well, I'm in the unusual position of being in the Peter May position on a case where he said in previous cases that when there's opposition, particularly from the ANC, he wants to ruminate on it, or at least think about it. I don't, I think there are, I don't need to ruminate on it. I think there are problematic issues, and I think they're in with our own regulations. So that's on us. I could be ready to move forward. Is there? I assume all these cases take a while to get presented to us and get developed in projects and financing. I assume the applicant would want us to move forward sooner than later. I don't know when our next meeting is, when this would otherwise be on an agenda item. Do we have a meeting coming up like next week or 2 weeks? I can't keep track of where our meetings
December
are.
15th.
No, we have a meeting next Thursday at 4 o'clock.
That's a hearing.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we're
Oh.
meeting at 4 o'clock.
So it would be a month delay. So I
Yeah.
think that's a factor that would affect. I'm ready to move forward.
So I share your concerns, though, Vice Chair. While I was just joking, I share your concerns. That's why I want us to have that. I know we've had this conversation about these zones before. I'm not sure where we landed. I need to remember, because a lot of stuff we always land. It seems like every time I ask it again, we land back in the same place. So I think we need to press that. I've asked Ms. Steingasser and Mr. Cochran and Ms. Shelton to remind us. Let's talk about that at our next meeting, whatever that is. Because I think Chairman Edwards is exactly correct. While we're sitting here having these conversations and talking about what we want to see, and even our previous attorneys knew this is what we wanted to at least look at. So we need to see where it is in the scope of things. We know we're always giving OP a lot of stuff to do, and they always come rise to the occasion. So let's see where we are and where that is in the scheme of things. So we won't have to keep coming out saying what we want to see, and then we will hopefully have an understanding of where we are. Now, I don't want to babble, so I'll leave it alone. So I'm ready to go ahead and move forward, but I do agree with we need to deal with that sooner than later. All right, so with that, if somebody like to make a motion, I will entertain a motion.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I would be glad to make a motion. And I would comment that I appreciate Vice Chair Miller pointing out that I'm usually the one who is not ready to move forward on the night when we have opposition. It's just one of those things where I don't think that there's anything that we're going to learn or be able to figure out in that time period. And so, yeah, I recognize that I'm being inconsistent here, but this is one of those things where I think it's okay to move forward tonight. So with that, I would make a motion that the Zoning Commission approves case number 22-28, 1100 South Capitol LLC, design review in M and South Capitol Streets sub area at square 698, lots 814 and 817.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any further discussion? Not hearing. Michelle, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner May,
Yes.
Commissioner Imamura,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
The vote is 4 to 0 to 1 to approve final action, zoning commission case number 22-28. The -1 being the third mayoral appointee position. And I just asked Ms. Scheiker if she would provide a draft order within the next 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you so much. We will. We appreciate the commission's consideration.
Thank you.
So Michelle, do we have anything else before us tonight?
Nothing.
So what I'm going to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and to my colleagues, I'm going to give you a gift. We're not going to have a hearing on the 21st. Is that correct, Michelle?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So
That
we will
was
not have,
removed.
the zoning commission will not meet on the 21st, but we will meet on November the 28th, 2022. So it's a very short vacation. And that topic that night will be McDonald's Corporation. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their participation in this hearing tonight, and I wish you all a happy, safe Thanksgiving. And this hearing is adjourned. Good night.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yep.